Her trembling hands gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white as snow against the mahogany wood. Her eyes, pools of unshed tears, stared directly into his. And in that silent, tense-filled room, she poured out her heart, trusting him to be the one to understand. But he was frozen, trapped in a web of emotions, unable to respond. His mind raced through memories, trying to connect the dots, searching for answers. But the more he thought, the deeper the mystery became. Who was this woman? Why was she here? What did she want from him? Then suddenly, a memory flickered to life. A long-forgotten moment from his past. His heart skipped a beat as realization dawned on him. Could it be? Was this really the answer he'd been searching for all along? As he grappled with this revelation, his mind reeled from the implications. What did this mean for him, for her? How would it change everything? The weight of the truth threatened to consume him, and he knew he had a decision to make. Would he confront the past, or let it continue to haunt him? Would he embrace the unexpected twist of fate, or resist it? The CU was torn, caught between his present reality and the shadows of his past. It had been months since Ava had left home, since her mother had passed away. Her father, a well-known CU, seemed distant and cold, focused only on work and money. But something in her gut told her to go to him. So here she was, standing before him, the polished steel and glass walls of his office amplifying the vulnerability in her posture. Why are you here? His voice was like ice, echoing in the vast space, sending shivers down her spine. Despite the chill in his tone, Ava took a deep breath and pressed on. She had come too far to turn back now. Reaching into her pocket, she pulled out a small envelope and placed it on his desk. The leather surface contrasted sharply with the steel and glass around them, a tangible reminder of her presence in this cold, corporate jungle. What's this? His eyes, sharp and assessing, never leaving hers, waited for an answer. My mother's journal, Ava whispered, her gaze fixed on the intricate pattern on the envelope. The mere mention of her mother seemed to stir something within him, a flicker of emotion crossing his face so quickly it could have been misinterpreted as a mirage. He leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. Why are you giving me this? His voice, though devoid of warmth, held a hint of curiosity. It was a crack in the armor, a chink in the icy exterior he'd presented earlier, and Ava was ready to exploit it. Taking another deep breath, she lifted her head, her eyes shining with unshed tears. I need your help, Dad. The word hung heavy in the air between them, a silent plea echoing in the vast expanse of the office. For a moment, the room was filled with an awkward silence. The CEO sat motionless, his gaze unwavering. Then his eyes, hardened by years of dealing with corporate sharks, betrayed a hint of vulnerability. "I don't understand," he finally said, his voice a low rumble. The facade of icy detachment was momentarily lowered, revealing the raw honesty in his words. Ava's bottom lip trembled, threatening to break. "I need you to pretend to be my dad." The words tumbled out of her mouth, barely a whisper in the vast expanse of his office. In that instant, the CEO's composure, honed over years of high-stakes negotiations, faltered. A flicker of surprise crossed his face, quickly replaced by a bewildered frown. The polished steel and glass that encased them seemed to magnify the shock in his eyes. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice betraying a hint of confusion. The controlled world he inhabited was built on clarity, on precision, and this request was a jarring dissonance in that world. The question hung in the air between them, unanswered, as the CEO struggled to comprehend the bizarre proposition placed before him. His mind raced, seeking logic in the face of the irrational. In the sterile environment of his office, a battle of wills ensued. The CEO, a man accustomed to orchestrating outcomes, found himself off script, grappling with an emotional turmoil he hadn't anticipated. The pristine order of his existence was being challenged, and he wasn't sure if he was ready to play along. His brow furrowed, his gaze intense, locked onto Ava. He was a predator assessing his prey, ensuring there were no hidden pitfalls in her words. She met his stare without flinching, her own resolve evident. After what felt like an eternity, he finally spoke. His voice, though even, held a note of caution. Why would I do that? The question was a loaded one, carrying the weight of unspoken accusations. Ava drew a shaky breath, her eyes dropping to the journal on the table, as if seeking solace in its worn pages. "Because I need my dad. I need someone to tell me everything's going to be okay. I need you to pretend to be my dad, just for today." The CEO felt a jolt, a discordant note, struck in the symphony of his composure. There was an underlying desperation in her voice, a raw need that tugged at something deep within him, something buried under layers of ambition and professional detachment. He leaned forward, his gaze turning from predatory to analytical. "And what makes you think I can do that?" The words were carefully measured, each syllable a piece in a larger puzzle he was determined to solve. She looked up then, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that belied her fragile frame. "Because you are my dad." The bomb exploded in the sterile confines of his office. Years of repressed memories, buried under the weight of a single name, came rushing back to the surface. His breath hitched, his eyes widening in dawning realization. "How is this possible?" he whispered, his voice betraying a tremor of disbelief. The controlled world he'd built around himself threatened to crumble, revealing the raw chaos of emotions he'd kept at bay for so long. In the face of his stunned silence, Ava reached out, her hand hovering above his. Then, with a tenderness that belied her earlier assertiveness, she placed her fingers on top of his. The contact was electric, sending jolts of recognition through his system. He stared at her hand on his own, frozen in place. The leather of the briefcase, the intricate design on her nails, the gentle pulse beneath his fingertips, they all whispered the same undeniable truth. This was his daughter. A rush of protective instinct surged through him, thawing the icy barriers he'd so carefully constructed around his heart. He wanted to reach out to gather her into a hug that would mend years of fractured moments. But his hand remained rooted to the table, held captive by the shock of the revelation. As the gravity of the situation sunk in, a whirlwind of emotions threatened to consume him. Confusion, disbelief, a surge of protective instinct, and a profound sense of loss. He wanted to ask 1,000 questions, to bridge the chasm of years that separated them, but no words came out. Time seemed to stand still in that opulent prison of his own making, trapping him in a labyrinth of emotions. Outside, the city bustled with life, oblivious to the seismic shift that had occurred within those four walls. The CEO sat mesmerized, the weight of the revelation threatening to topple the carefully constructed edifice of his life. His gaze shifted from her hand on his to her face, searching for answers in the depths of her tear-filled eyes. Every line, every crease, every dimple was a mirror to his own forgotten past, a reflection of the son he once was. Then, as if sensing his turmoil, Ava withdrew her hand, the sudden emptiness on the table mirroring the hollowness in his chest. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice catching. "If this is too much, I understand. You don't have to pretend." He watched her then, truly saw her for the first time in what felt like a lifetime. The fragility in her movements, the hope in her eyes, the strength in her quiet resolve. And in that moment, he knew what he had to do. With a surge of determination, he reached out, his hand enveloping hers. Her touch, so familiar and yet so new, sent shivers down his spine. "I am sorry," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "for not being there, for not knowing. But I am here now." As their hands remained intertwined, a silent promise passed between them, a vow to navigate the uncharted waters of their newfound relationship. The CEO, once a solitary figure in a sea of success, was now anchored by the presence of family, bound to a past he tried to bury. The sterile confines of his office, once a symbol of his controlled existence, had become the birthplace of a new beginning. Outside, the city continued its relentless march, oblivious to the transformation that had taken place within the towering walls. The CEO, no longer a solitary player in the game of life, had found a partner in the journey ahead. Hand in hand with his daughter, he was ready to face the uncertainties, to confront the ghosts of the past, to build a future that was nothing short of extraordinary.